So hello everyone, today we're going to cover a specific class of problems that you might see on the AMC contest and maybe elsewhere as well. And this problem and others similar to it involves this really nasty looking expression with a bunch of square roots in them. So how are we going to solve this? So there's not a whole lot we can do with this expression in its current form. And so one way we can think about this is, if there are square roots, let's just see what happens if we square this expression. So we're going to look at the square of this thing here. And so this will give us this thing squared, so let's call this A, and let's call this B. Then this is essentially a plus b all squared. And a plus b all squared is equal to a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. You can derive this by writing this as a plus b times a plus b, and then using the FOIL method, we can multiply all of these out. I'm not going to discuss this here. You can use it as a fact that you can memorize, that a plus b all squared is equal to a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. Okay, so let's see what this giant mess would expand into. So first we want a squared, so that will be 9 minus 6 root 2, because the square root and the squares simply cancel each other out. And then we have 2 times the square root of 9 minus 6 root 2 times the square root of 9 plus 6 root 2. And finally, we have 9 plus 6 root 2 as b squared. Already we can see some nice things happening here. First, we see that these two things cancel out, and we're left with 18 plus 2 times this thing here. And since both of these are under a square root, we can combine it into one big square root and write it as this. So now I'm going to move on to a second page. I'm going to transcribe this here. So now obviously the next step would be to see if this thing here would simplify, because if this would simplify, then we would be left with a much simpler expression. So let's see. Well, the natural thing to do is just to multiply everything out. You might be able to recognize this as a way to factor a difference of squares, and that is in an formula where if we have a squared minus b squared, this is equal to a plus b times a minus b. Again, you can prove this by simply using FOIL to multiply these factors out. And we are going to use this as a fact here, because as you can probably tell, a over here is 9, and b over here is 6 root 2. So this is equal to 18 plus 2 times the square root of 9 squared minus 6 root 2 all squared. And what is 6 root 2 all squared? Well, if we have 6 root 2 times 6 root 2, then this would give us 2, and so this is equal to 72. And so this is equal to 18 plus 2 square root, 9 squared is 81, so 81 minus 72, which is 18 plus 2 root 9, or 18 plus 2 times 3, which is 24. So now going back, we see that 24 is equal to the square of the answer that we want. And so the answer to this question must then be square root 24. And we can factor out a 2 squared from under the square root to outside of the square root. So this will give us 2 root 6. And so B is our final answer. And now I'm going to give you a very similar problem for you to try out if you want to. And I'll clear everything. And the question is, simplify the square root of 19 plus 5 root 13 plus the square root of 19 minus 5 root 13. So simplify this as much as possible, and if you want to do this by yourself, then pause the video here. Alright, so I'm going to give the solution right now. I'm going to go through this a bit quicker than last time because I don't really need to cover all of the details. So I'm going to square this expression, and we're going to get 19 plus 5 root 13 plus 2 times the square root of 19 plus 5 root 13, square root of 19 minus 5 root 13, plus 19 minus 5 root 13. And these two cancel out, and we get 2 times 19, or 38, plus 2 times this thing on the inside, and we already know that this is a factorization of a difference of squares, so this would simply be 19 squared minus 5 root 13 all squared. And after working with this thing under the square root, we see that this is equal to 38 plus 2 root 36, and root 36 is 6, so this will be 38 plus 2 times 6, or 38 plus 12, or 50. So the square of our expression is equal to 50, which means that our original expression is equal to root 50. And we can factor out 5 squared from under the square root, and so our simplified answer would be 5 root 2. So this expression here is equal to 5 root 2. And this concludes our discussion on this type of problem on the AMC and other contests.